China is currently giving the US defense system nightmares and headaches so much that responding to the new threat will be costly, time-consuming, and require cooperation among multiple US military departments. During China's weapon test, the warhead was launched into orbit and orbited the Earth for a while before re-entering the atmosphere at hypersonic speed towards its target. A weapon such as this should not also have the ability to carry a nuclear warhead. But guess what? This one does. There's more to this aircraft, and we will do it justice in this video. However, before we get into the details, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, Military Technology Updates. What is a hypersonic weapon? First, you should note that the US has built up high-tech defenses against ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles. However, the method used by this new Chinese hypersonic weapon would evade fixed US defenses. How? The US defenses intercept missiles with the aid of polar trajectory ballistics, but this new weapon could possibly bypass that undetected. And that happens to be very discomforting for a nation whose claim to world power is constantly being challenged. But what exactly are hypersonic weapons? These are aircraft that can travel at a minimum of 5 times the speed of sound. That is way faster than conventional weapons that are prominent in today's military market. Consider a Tomahawk cruise missile as an example of this. If the weapon were launched from a US submarine or ship, it would take more than an hour to hit a 1,000-kilometer target. But on the other hand, a hypersonic missile would only take 10 minutes. These hypersonic weapons are of two main types: gliding vehicles and cruise missiles. The cruise missile versions use air-breathing engines and high speed to power their hypersonic speeds. On the other hand, attacks from hypersonic glide vehicles are launched from a rocket in space and glide toward their targets on an unpredictable trajectory. Generally, their maneuverability and incredible speed make it difficult for existing air defenses to track and discover them, not to mention shoot them down. In fact, a report recently revealed a 78% chance that a missile traveling at 5 times the speed of sound would not be intercepted by the current air defense systems. Unfortunately, things get even worse as the report also disclosed that the failure rate increases to 90% if the speed is 6 times that of sound. This virtually means that no air defense system right now is ready to defend against hypersonic weapons. However, besides speed, maneuverability is another key difference between conventional ballistic missiles and hypersonic glide vehicles. These deadly weapons can change course after they are released. So, what gives China the edge in developing this missile ballistic? The Chinese have been studying this since back in the 1950s. The first notable figure is a rocket scientist known as Qian Chusen. The man is regarded in China as the father of space technology. In 1948, Qian proposed a design for a hypersonic glide vehicle. The appeal of these weapons to the Chinese military lies in their ability to cripple a powerful competitor without waging nuclear war. In addition, a lot of the country's hypersonic missiles are armed with conventional warheads that can destroy high-value targets. These high-value targets include aircraft carriers, while it adheres to the Chinese disinterest in being the first to resort to nuclear weapons. Thus, this is arguably Beijing's preferred weapon against foreign military interventions. What is this weapon supposedly called? Sometime in 2019, during China's 70th anniversary celebration, the nation's military unveiled a hypersonic missile called the Dongfeng 17. A major news outlet described the hypersonic weapon as a nightmare predator. It is designed to attack aircraft carrier fleets and many other targets. After the 70th anniversary parade, the world realized that the DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle had been tested in 2017. Further analysis revealed that the DF-17 warhead could also serve as a new IRBM, Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile design. What's even scarier about all this is that a review of the parade by a Chinese military affairs blog described the DF-17 as a combat-ready hypersonic weapon. How amazing is this hypersonic weapon? The US Army Space and Missile Defense Command is probably already running around trying to find a solution to the Chinese test. After all, they're the ones charged with protecting the American homeland. But, as stated earlier, US defense systems can intercept ballistic missile warheads coming from one direction. For this, they use an Arctic or polar approach. Many were surprised that China could build a weapon with such capabilities. Nonetheless, air defense systems across nations should have been working on improvements, since many nations had claimed to be working on hypersonic weapons. Now, it appears that China is the first to claim the cake. They have a hypersonic glide vehicle capable of carrying a warhead at low Earth orbit to encircle the globe for a while, all at 5 times the speed of sound. There's a solid reason to disprove the surprise from a US official. After all, China was known to have been working on these missiles for over 10 years. As stated in a 2019 report by the Defense Intelligence Agency, China had been developing a range of technologies to counter US ballistic missile defense systems. The report also disclosed some features including decoys, jamming, heat shielding, independent target re-entry, chaff, and hypersonic glide vehicles. Therefore, if US officials are indeed surprised, then it's because they underestimated China's capabilities in this area, which is funny considering how long they've been into it. That would also mean that they did follow or appreciate years of Chinese investigative work reports on hypersonic missiles. It should be said that the weapons test did miss its target by a wide margin, about 24 miles. Still, the fact remains that they've made amazing progress on hypersonic weapons. To give more context to this incredibly deadly weapon from China, you should note this. This hypersonic space weapon, when active, can place warheads in low Earth orbit and have them search for targets around the planet. The weapon might be new, but the strategy itself is not. The Soviet Union experimented on such warheads in the 1960s. The US called it a fractional orbital bombardment system. Later, the USSR dropped it and invented other systems designed to threaten China and America. As it stands now, China takes the lead regarding having a weapon that would be invincible against most defense systems. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Military Technology Updates. Let's get back to the video. The biggest threat to US defense systems. It appears that the US is behind both Russia and China in hypersonic weapons technology, but that's not all. According to the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, the US faces a real threat to its space assets. Last month, the organization reported on space threats, suggesting that China's hypersonic missile test was part of the country's arsenal of space weapons. Moreover, it indicated that the space weapon was targeted at US satellites that aid military precision-guided missiles and communications. At this point, there's no doubt that the test has caused widespread panic and concern for the US military. General Mark A. Milley, a member of the Chiefs of Staff, referred to the test as something similar to the Sputnik moment. Scott Barrier, a DIA director, disclosed that the US losing space-based navigation and communication services would come with devastating consequences, especially for warfighters during a conflict. Nevertheless, it should be noted that the report on China's possible intentions for the hypersonic weapon came shortly after the US announced its hypersonic plans. Moreover, America collaborates with its UK and Australian partners to develop hypersonic missiles. Yet, according to a new timeline, America's first hypersonic weapon could be delayed for a whole year, despite lawmakers protesting that the Pentagon is falling behind on new technology that's already in the hands of Russia and China. It just always appears that the two powerhouses not under NATO are always working and spending on their military. There's always that feeling that China is out for blood against any nation that has the intention to ever interfere with its politics. During the fractional orbital launch, the Spaceweapon hit the ground target as the glider traveled close to 25,000 miles in space. This was from China's Hypersonic test report. And there's more to it to show just how powerful it is. You should also note that last year, General Chance Saltzman, a top space official, revealed that a system launched in fractional orbit could stay in orbit for a more extended period. This would mean that China's hypersonic weapon could remain in space longer than during the test. Unfortunately, this would mean that US assets have little safety guarantees if there is a conflict between them and China. The DIA reports stated that the flight test spent more than 100 minutes in flight, thus making it the longest flight time of any Chinese ground attack weapon system ever. Kevin Ryder, a senior space and counter-space analyst, stated that China's hypersonic weapon had never been seen until last year during the test. However, he declared that it was too early to assess the weapon's role, whether it would be used for conventional strikes, nuclear strikes, or both. There's no denying that the Chinese have been working hard on developing this kind of weapon. This weapon's targeting process has features to help it safely re-enter the atmosphere, change orbits, separate payloads, and build delivery vehicles. Its sensors can target satellites and launch ground anti-satellite missiles. It can also send out orbiting robotic killer satellites, which possess the capacity to crush or grab other satellites. Lest I forget, know that electronic, laser, and internet warfare tools are all part of China's space warfare weaponry. Other nations are trying to build this type of weapon. Of course, the US is trying to build a weapon such as this, as mentioned earlier. However, it's not between China and the US alone. Last year, Russia began testing its Noodle anti-missile system against a satellite. The result? More than 1,500 pieces of massive debris and tens of thousands of lethal and untraceable substances. Moscow's space arsenal also contains multiple ground-based laser weapons capable of blinding or destroying orbiting satellites. This includes the Peresviet laser weapon, which Vladimir Putin regarded as a new type of strategic weapon. These observations are critical considering the Russian war is developing into a massive disaster in Ukraine. US officials had previously warned that Russia could take the aggression into space. Russia is developing the Burevestnik anti-satellite missile, which is stipulated to go off from a MiG-31 fighter jet. The report that made this disclosure also stated that one of Russia's anti-satellite systems has been monitoring a US national security satellite and is currently approaching it. Its intentions are unknown, but there's a good chance that it's malicious. Besides Russia on space weapons, North Korea and Iran also appear to be building space capabilities that could be used in future battles. Iran is a country that recognizes the strategic and intrinsic value of space and counter-space abilities. And since they know this, it makes sense that they'll attempt to deny an adversary the use of space during a conflict. North Korea, on the other hand, has actual weapons in service. In theory, their ballistic missiles and space launches like the Unha-3 SLV could attempt to attack satellites. While all these countries are in the hypersonic space weapon race with the US, only China and Russia pose the real threat. And right now, China's threat is the most obvious one. If you enjoy watching videos like this, leave a like and subscribe to the Military Technology Updates channel. That way, you don't miss out on our following videos.